guys, I am Dr. Kim Sage. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm so glad you're here. Today's video is all about how to cope when you have an avoidantly attached partner. And next week I'll discuss how to cope when you have a more anxiously attached partner. The core of a more avoidantly attached person is that in childhood, they had to learn to be autonomous and independent quite early on. They had the kind of parents who didn't necessarily generally love emotional needs or emotions much at all in terms of, anxiety or anger or neediness. In fact, those parents inadvertently or unconsciously or consciously shut those needs down and more reinforced the child when the child was playing by themselves or, appearing to be a little grown up and able to do and take care of themselves. And so that got reinforced. But that didn't change the fact that the child had needs, emotional needs. And so what these kids do is very early on, they learn to deactivate, to shut down their needs. And so it's not like they don't have them. I have worked with many people with this attachment style. And of course, I'm seeing the ones who want to change and are coming into therapy, but they have a lot of needs. It's just that I'll discuss in a minute. There's a lot of reasons why those needs can be uncomfortable for them and really truly pushed down. I want to, as I said, remind you that both sides of, let's say, an anxious and avoidant partner have their work to do. And both of them, including disorganized as the third style, all of those styles have a fear of intimacy and closeness and abandonment in different ways. It's just, it kind of manifests differently. And so keep that in mind. This is not a video to watch if you are with someone who's, say, avoidant and they are making no effort to change. They don't care about growing and healing. This is not a video to teach you how to just deal with it and, compromise what you need. And it is important to know that even though it may be difficult for your avoidant partner to tap into emotions, to deal with vulnerability, they're not off the hook for that. They are still accountable and responsible for growing and healing. All right, so let's just also do a quick summary a little bit deeper into this style. Basically, there's a denial of attachment needs and avoidance of closeness, intimacy, and dependence. Remember, because that wasn't allowed or safe or possible in childhood. So the needs exist, but the ability to be really intimately connected to another human being, not quite so safe. And so they have really two main goals in this style when you're really operating from a more avoidant standpoint. One is to gain whatever you need by maintaining distance, control, and self-reliance. We can see compulsive self-reliance in avoidant attachment, meaning that it's always our go-to. We almost overdo, I can do it by myself. That's probably the theme if we had to give ourselves sort of a mantra. It is, I can do it by myself. You know how kids say that when they're kind of becoming like toddlers and pushing back, except we kind of can stay that way. And we had to stay that way to survive. So that's why it's so hard to break. And then secondly, ignoring or denying and avoiding needs and negative emotional states that might trigger attachment activation. So what does that mean? That means intentionally shutting down anything that feels emotional and needy that might trigger us to want to engage in a more classically attachment behavior, reaching out for connection, being soothed, all of that can get shut down. So there's an actual intent to shut down, remove, and separate from things that would normally and do trigger those deep needs for attachment. They had to learn really early on that those were not going to get met. And so it's not safe to live in that neediness, right? It's not. And so that is what plays out when you are with an avoidant partner. Now, what do you do about it? I want to talk a little bit about the vulnerabilities specifically of an avoidantly attached person. Because if you are their partner and vice versa, this goes for whatever style you are, it is imperative in long-term and committed relationships, and I would say this is true even for your kids in some ways, like you want to know what their vulnerabilities are, and you don't want to do things that intentionally upset and frighten and wound them. Now, this doesn't mean you tiptoe around your needs, but let's talk about what that really looks like, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post either here or down below or on my TikTok or Instagram a list of questions to ask your partner about their childhood so that you can get to the vulnerabilities I'm talking about that I'm going to go through, and I'll come back to that, okay? So the first vulnerability is a deep shame inside for having needs. Those with this style feel that they're not allowed to have needs, and it feels so unsafe that there can be kind of like a, I always do this when I talk about shame, like a toxic, pulling into self. It's like I'm not allowed to have needs and I'm bad for having needs, which if I'm not allowed to have needs makes it really hard for me to ask for things from you and to give things to you that I might think are needy because I don't let myself have them. Why should I let you have them? Or why should I even tell you what my needs are? There's too much shame around that because maybe you won't meet my needs. So I'll just stay deactivated from even having them. The next one is feeling intruded upon. People with this attachment style feel like you're always coming at them, whether it's in their physical space, their psychological space. And so that can be really uncomfortable. For example, just walking up on them quickly if they're like on their computer watching a show and getting really loud and yelling down the hallway. They typically hate their names being yelled in the house. And so, no one probably loves that, right? But there's like this, just they've been living in this sort of pseudo dreamy auto-regulation world a lot of the time. Self-soothing, taking care of themselves. It could be through numbing or addictions or just, spacing out or video games or work. And so when you quickly intrude upon that, it can be really invasive for them. And so doing things like putting your hand on their shoulder, hey babe, I need you to, in 5 minutes, no, we're leaving, touching their leg maybe quickly, finding ways to communicate that aren't so invasive. Certainly not yelling down the house, or through the house, I should say. Two is feeling trapped and out of control. Being in control is a very important skill for many of us in certain childhoods. When that's taken away from us, it can be really scary. And in relationships, what happens? You lose control. You cannot control another person. You can't control if they will hurt you or leave you or push your boundaries or ask you to be vulnerable. And just in general, that doesn't feel good in your life and your world and your job and your family. The fear of too much intimacy. Remember that they didn't get any practice in being intimate and vulnerable. In fact, they had to wall up a bit. And so that's why in the beginning it seems like they're just great and they're so warm and they can engage. But the minute it becomes like increasingly, there's an increasing demand for vulnerability, that can create a fear because they don't know how to do that. And it can feel very uncomfortable and very challenging to their core of who they are. The last one I should say is fear of being blamed. They have a really hard time because they were reinforced for oftentimes achievement and success or what they were doing, what it looked like. And so other things that feel like blame can feel like shame. Any kind of feedback can feel like criticism or control. And now we're getting into your vulnerabilities, right? If you make a mistake or you didn't get something right, you're not perfect. The wall has to come down if we're talking about being vulnerable and talking about maybe your role in something that maybe you inadvertently hurt my feelings or said something that I didn't like. And so they can be really defensive at times, this style, when you bring it up. So you want to know what their vulnerabilities are. You want to know what yours are. You want to communicate them to each other, especially your top 3 or 4. It may not be the ones I suggested. It could be anything, but what are the things that trigger you both most in the relationship with each other? But I think it can be very helpful to understand your partner's story so that you are very clear about, what things you're going to do that are not going to intentionally hurt them and that help you grow together. And so that's the next thing is you don't do things that once you know their vulnerabilities, intentionally trigger them. And when you do, you try to make repairs. And so the last couple issues here are that you try to prevent issues from happening around the core vulnerabilities, and you don't do things to hurt each other. And then you learn to rapidly repair the damage when that happens. You say things like, I'm really sorry. I realize now that when I said or did X, Y, or Z, I know that really upsets you. And so I'll make an effort to not do that again. So I hope you found this video helpful. As I said, I will link some more things down below on resources. Please don't forget to subscribe, and if you want to get notified when I post new videos, check the box for notifications. And don't forget also that I have 3 amazing courses on Thinkific. I'll link down below. Also, those include a checklist on how to identify borderline and or narcissistic parents. And really quickly, they are a free course. There's a free course on identifying childhood emotional abuse and neglect, a course on remothering your inner child and learning how to heal that little wounded, often broken self of ours inside by things you do and say using my 3-part protocol. And there's a workbook there, and journals, journal prompts and exercises, and lots of guided meditations and affirmations. And then my main course, which is healing and dealing with the trauma of borderline and or narcissistic, more immature, wounding parents. And that comes with a 100-page workbook, 74 lessons, exercises, journals, lots of work, affirmations, you name it. And also really quickly, those last 2 courses, which are paid courses, do include access to what I'm hoping to build as a community of those of us wanting to heal from our childhood wounds together, where I can post private things, you guys can meet each other and support each other. So please check those out. Thank you so much for watching. Please stay safe and well, and I'll see you next time.